to start off with a bit of an overview of permaculture, and then I'm going to switch to a different set of slides which gives some examples of how it's being used. So let's start with, oh no, that's not the button I meant to press. That's the button I meant to press. So permaculture goes back to the 1970s, but in many ways goes back a lot beyond that. The word itself, permaculture, comes from permanent agriculture and permanent culture. And the idea of permanent is the idea really of durable and long lasting. So not permanent like concrete, but more permanent like a river. You know, a river is dynamic and flowing, but continues over the long term. And really the idea is that a sustainable culture requires a sustainable agriculture. So it's got really strong roots in agriculture, but it's grown into a discipline which covers really every aspect of human settlements and community. It was a collaboration between Bill Mollison and David Holmgren in Australia. So it had a kind of a flavour of that. And in the 1970s, it was influenced by the self-sufficiency movement, the environmental movement, things like Silent Spring from Rachel Carson, the ecology, which was a sort of growing discipline, lots of lessons from indigenous wisdom and traditional practices. And in many ways, you could think that permaculture combines agriculture, ecology, and landscape design. So there were some of the sort of ingredients at the beginning. And to use the kind of ingredients metaphor, that there are three kind of key ingredients you need to make something permaculture. So the first thing is that, is a set of ethics. So, you know, these describe our kind of values and how we want to behave. So ethics. We also have ecological principles. So basically lessons from nature. 3.8 billion years of research and development. It works incredibly well. I'm an ecosystem. Every one of you is an ecosystem. Ecosystems are self-organizing, self-maintaining, self-regulating. They're incredibly powerful. And so we can take lessons from nature and then apply them to human systems. So that's the sort of lessons from nature, if you like. So we've got these ethics, we've got these lessons from nature, and then the third bit really is about design. So, okay, we want to make a ethical, earth care, people care, fair shares future. Nature's brilliant, but what are we going to do here and now? And we answer that question using a design approach. And all of that informs this idea of kind of holistic thinking and action. So trying to think broadly about how we fit into the bigger system that we're in, whatever that might be. So yeah, just to say a little bit more about each of those, the ethics are what you might call the kind of highest common denominator. So Bill Mollison did quite a lot of work to say, what are the different world views and traditional views about how we should behave in the world, and religions and various different sources and inspirations. And he felt that this earth care, people care, and fair shares, which is about living within limits and redistributing our surplus, was sort of the thing that could reflect where we could agree. And it's like our highest collective aspirations that could still include whether or not you are a Hindu or a Muslim or a communist or whatever it might be. So it's something that hopefully many people can agree on. Certainly, earth care, people care, fair shares is what pretty much any child will tell you we should be doing. So that's a good start. And then, like I say, the lessons from nature. These principles are about helping us to ask good questions. So here you can see some of the principles that were developed by David Holmgren, and they're quite, on one level, quite simple statements, and then behind them there's a bit more complexity. So one of these here is like use and value diversity. So in nature is diverse. You have many different elements in a system, and they work together, and you have diversity of different sorts of trees and plants. So diversity is a principle in nature, and we can apply that into our own systems. Or produce no waste. That's another one that seems very straightforward, let's not produce any waste. But behind that is this idea that the output of one part of the system becomes the input of another. So there's all this cycling of nutrients and resources going on. So there are sort of 12 slogans here. Creatively use and respond to change, design from patterns to details. And then behind those slogans, there's sort of deeper thinking that really helps you to think in like a system, make connections between things. And really that's the trick to permaculture, is all about relationships. It's about how do these things connect and support each other, whether that's in a garden or in a community or in a community garden. And then the design aspect. There are tools we've taken from other disciplines, and there are some things that we've created for ourselves, things like zoning and sector analysis, and then things like keyline planning, which is an Australian approach to watershed management or water management. And then you've got processes like SADI and SADIMET. And anyway, the words don't matter too much, but there are lots of design tools and processes that we can draw on. And what that does is it really helps you to see what needs to go where in relationship to other things. So you kind of create a pattern in space. So this diagram is of Springfield's Community Gardens in Bradford, and that was done in the early 90s. And that's a sort of spatial design which shows where things are going in relationship to each other. And then the other thing that they did there was a sort of a phasing plan. So when will things happen? So designed for what's going to happen first. So the first things that they did were create the nursery. And from the nursery, they grew the trees, which then populated the rest of the site. So a design is also about how things happen in time as well as how they happen in space. So that's a bit about design. And I'm going to leave this presentation now, and I'm going to go to another one, which is more about some of the applications. So people have taken these ethics, which relate to how our values, so they're quite a big motivator. They've taken ecological principles, and then they've done designs which they've turned into action. And I think it's the action which is possibly the most exciting and interesting thing to look at. So I want to just show you some applications of how permaculture has been used in Britain. So this is Garden Cottage, which is a food forest in Scotland, started in 1990. And there's all sorts of different things going on here. So there's composting, food preserving, there's a food forest, so sort of multi-level forest garden. Lots of biodiversity features, bat boxes, bird boxes, insect piles for spiders and lacewings and so on. They've got solar water heating, they've got solar panels for electricity, they've got a water harvesting system, they've got poultry, so they've got ducks and they've got chickens. And I think the extraordinary fact about Garden Cottage is on 800 square meters, it produces 1.25 tons of food, which is the equivalent of 16 tons per hectare, which is pretty good. It's got 500 trees. And one of my favorite statistics is that they've got 70 species of birds. So there's 38 species that live there, 22 species that come for lunch, and 20 species that come on holiday. Now, it's just an extraordinary place. And as you can see there, it's not just that it's incredibly productive with plants, it's also incredibly productive with people. So there's courses, there are events, lots of harvesting activities, and lots of sort of different fun. So that's a great example of what someone's done in a very large back garden. In Scotland, I won't go to this one. So this one now is one of my favourite farms in Wales called Henbant, which is a small, as it says, a small diverse farm and community farm, family and community farm, using permaculture principles and regenerative techniques. So this now is on a bigger scale. I think they've got about 30 hectares. It's about 4 or 5 years old, so it's quite recent. And they do mob grazing, which is a form of sort of rotational grazing where the animals graze in at one place and then they move to another space and then they move to another space, divided by electric fence. They have community supported agriculture scheme, so effectively a small market garden, and they supply, I think, about 30 boxes. They have veg for general sale, meat for general sale, eggs and milk. And then they also do camping and events. So they had the Paramaethu Cymru, Permaculture Wales gathering last year, all sorts of local events, and then they provide consultancy and advice. And then Matt Swarbrick, who does Henbant, is an advisor to Farming Connect, and he's connecting with farmers across North Wales because they're based just near Anglesey. And yeah, the interesting thing maybe about Henbant in relationship to what we've just seen in Scotland is same ethics, same ecological principles, same design methods, very different application. So how it looks in your back garden, well, okay, in a large walled garden that Graham Bell's got in Coldstream, is quite different to what you might do on 30 hectares in Anglesey. So the ethics and principles, the design methods are the same, but the techniques you choose are different depending on how big or small your project is and what your project's about. This is another one in Wales, Tir Penrhos Isath, and they've got features like eco building, composting toilets, big home garden. They're off grid. Their big thing has been regeneration. Starting in 1992, they've looked at how you regenerate woodlands, and their knowledge of that has gone on to influence actually a lot of projects that are now very popular under the whole kind of rewilding badge. So there's something that can be applied at a very, very big scale. And this is an example of the sort of zoning method. So you can see maybe a bit further down where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down here by the 1991 number. In permaculture, we sort of zone things. So zone 1, centre of activities. Zone 5 is the kind of wilderness space. And yeah, they really concentrate on the wilderness. Another project which it might be sort of really relevant for Communigrow is Hyde Park Source. So it's a social enterprise based in Leeds, and Hyde Park Source themselves primarily do kind of design consultancy, and they get funds to then help different communities to develop their own projects. So by using a permaculture design approach. So this is the Cross Green Growing Together site. I wish I could show you more photos here. They've got beautiful murals and all sorts of different things. And they've just created some very simple raised beds, really good access. There's lots of people with mobility problems and wheelchairs. So they've made the site very, very accessible. The polytunnel is, big wide paths. One of the big things that you can't see here is all the social, the cups of tea, the food, the support for people, the advice. So a very social side to this project. But yeah, Hyde Park Source provide, as it says there, sort of in-depth, long-term work with very disadvantaged communities, and they're giving people confidence and building skills, and then the sites that they develop with the community then become ongoing projects. So Cross Green Growing Together site is now self-maintaining project. which is being very successful as a kind of community hub. So again, same ethics, same principles, same design approach, but again, it looks very, very different. This is much more spacious. It's not as dense as the forest garden in Scotland. It's certainly not a wilderness, and it's not a 30-hectare farm with cows, but it's still an expression of permaculture. So again, it's about how you kind of interpret the framework and make it useful for your own situation. I think I will talk a little bit about Scotswood, because this is a really brilliant project where what you can see now is this amazing forest school, forest garden, community garden, composting, wildlife meadows. You go there and you see a lot of really fabulous growing. It started as a project, an intergenerational project for young people and old people. So on the Scotswood estate in Newcastle upon Tyne, there was a lot of antisocial behaviour. A lot of old people felt very threatened by young people, and they created this project to make relationships between old people and young people using a garden as a space to do that. And it really worked. The monitoring and evaluation has shown a really great improvement in community cohesion in the area, which obviously has its ups and downs, but again, the permaculture thinking here about making relationships actually was about bringing different generations together, but using a garden to help do that. I know I'm whizzing through, but I hope there's a consistent message, and I look forward to your questions. I guess one of the things to say is that where it says these elements and features, these are the kinds of things that you'll see in many different places. These aren't unique to permaculture. Some things like forest gardening we've popularized, help to make more known. But composting toilets or community gardens, we didn't invent them. It's more about how you put them all together. That's the contribution that we make. Bedford Fields Forest Garden. I won't say much about this one other than, I guess, the design features that are really interesting here is that this is completely fully open access. So there's no gates, there's no fences. People come in at any time, and it's been designed to just be open. And during COVID, it was incredibly popular, used by people for their sort of official hour lockdown outside. And this has got a really fantastic mix of plants, and then actually a lot of the plants. So the guy there is Pete Tatum, and he runs the Hyde Park Source project, which I showed you earlier. And then there's Beth on the woman. There's Beth. Bedford Fields creates lots of plants, which then go out to other community groups that Hyde Park Source works with. So this is a sort of, it's not just a garden, it's also a nursery space for other projects. So then it's about building relationships between projects in Leeds, which is where I live. So I can say a bit more about that. And Apricot Centre, absolutely award-winning example of regenerative agriculture. And the interesting thing here is that they've used permaculture design to bring together agroforestry, biodynamics, veg box scheme, but also a lot of wellbeing and therapy. So although it is an amazing farm, it's also an educational space, and it's also a wellbeing space. So it's sort of part of the health service. So I think, when you get a really great holistic project, actually what you do is you start to tick lots of boxes. It's not just a food growing thing. It can also be about our health and well-being and so on. So I should probably stop there. I think I'm coming to the end of my time, but I'll just finish with my own back garden to say you can do it at home as well.